Sony released a new ZV-E1, and it's actually their best vlogging camera today. But you probably don't want it. Fam, mga kapatid, despite this camera being quite feature rich, you're probably not going to be using it for long video podcasts, at least in 4K, or for an A-cam for many high-stress client jobs. It is, however, content creation at a high level of production and convenience. You see, Sony's ZV line of cameras are all small form factors for the vloggers. The Sony ZV-E1, the ZV-E10, the ZV-1F. The Sony ZV-E1, yeah, it's just bounds ahead of all of those, especially because it's a more affordable full-frame camera with specs and performance of high-end Sony cameras. Like the A7SIII and FX3, it's got 4K 10-bit colors, shooting 4K 60 and later on 4K 120. Unlike the A7 IV, there's no crop in 4K. It's not part of the cinema line cameras, but you can still load in and bake in LUTs in your footage, which is pretty great for workflow. But even though it does not give you things like a dual SD card slot or an internal fan for long 4K recording, the shooting experience with AI may just sweeten the value of using that camera. You see, when it comes to having a camera literally follow you, the Sony ZV-E1 can crop and track you in a frame for a more dynamic experience, just like so. As a solo content creator, you've got to make your shots interesting, engaging, or at least different. This will serve as an alternative, if not in addition to, let's say, a slider shot, or any use of a slider or gimbal. I did buy a DJI RS2 to follow me for this purpose, but the setup time was too much friction for me to just do it over and over again. Can't say this is the best or most reliable feature of the Sony ZV-E1, but it's worth checking out. A more promising feature that you can't ignore about this camera is the new and improved clear image zoom. If you haven't been using clear image zoom before, I don't blame you. Although you do get more reach out of your lenses by zooming in 1.5 to 2 times, you compromise the ability to use autofocus tracking. However, with the new tech in the camera, you're still able to maintain all those autofocus features like face, eye, and touch tracking. Thank you, Jason Vog, for sharing that. Because now I'm thinking about saving some money and using my APS-C lenses with this feature to avoid vignetting. Because like the A7S3 and FX3, there's no Super 35 mode when shooting 4K on the ZV-E1. I like to be able to save some monies on these lenses, you know. No matter what lenses you're using on the camera, stabilized or not, you're probably gonna stop carrying your gimbal. All the image stabilization that I've used in the Sony system thus far, it's been okay. Nothing amazing compared to the footage that some people get out of something like the Panasonic system. But stabilization with the Sony ZV-E1 is looking good. With most stabilization technology, you're cropping into your footage to avoid any warping side effects on the edges. I've used the Sony's active stabilization with a slight 1.1 times crop in the A7S3 and now the FX30, but it doesn't look as great as the new dynamic active mode on the Sony ZV-E1. Despite all these features, you won't want this camera because for the price, you're probably better off just using the cameras that you already have, especially if one of them is a ZV camera anyway. For the price of maybe selling a camera in order to afford this, you can probably just save up the difference to actually buy an ultra-wide lens for vlogging and maybe a microphone too if you still need one. As a content creator in the photo video space, I've contemplated picking up a full-frame camera again, specifically for future comparisons, gear reviews, and tutorials. That's why I pre-ordered it, so subscribe for future videos. Sorry bud, one of you has to go. In the meantime, here's why I switched from the A7S III to the FX30.